good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome to the Bloody Disgusting Network. The following show is just horrifying. Beware.
My friendship to all of you precludes my involvement with any one of you. But if you wanna make love, then I do too, and I'll be right there behind you. All in the name of oh, all in the name of oh, all in the name of oh.
Greetings, constant listeners. It's Rock and Randall here, welcoming you back to the Dome. We are under it. We are under the dome. This is part 2 of our 3-part series, and there will be more content. Like I said in the last episode, we are going to do a Patreon exclusive episode on the cannibals, which was sort of the failed precursor to Under the Dome. You can learn more about that. Patreon.com/thebarons. I should be better about promoting that. I'm not great about it. Okay. But anyways, this is part 2. We're talking characters today because there's so many characters. We are basically devoting a whole episode to heroes and villains. And the way we're going to do it is this. We're talking about 4 main characters kind of as a group. We're going to talk about Barbie, Big Jim, Julia, and Junior. And then because I didn't want us to sort of like get in the weeds talking about like the Twitch-L clan, we brought each 3 characters that just really resonated with us. And some of them might overlap, and that's fine. I didn't want to like spoil it beforehand because I think part of the joy is hearing the characters that you guys really liked for the first time on air, live. But before we get started, let's go around and I'm trying to think of like a good question. I guess like Dan Caffrey, say hello and tell me, what did you have for dinner?
This is Dan Dale Barbara Caffrey. just sticking with the names. I've not had dinner yet. It's been I don't want to be one of those guys who like talks about how busy their day was and whatever, but a series of events, nothing crazy, just like a lot of like my son didn't fall asleep till like just a second ago, and my a glass bottle popped my car tire, so it's all fine. It's all good.
Dome fell over your apartment.
Dome fell over my apartment. There's woodchuck guts all over my foyer.
Do you know what you're going to eat for dinner?
Yes, well, actually, no, I did. I did heat up some sausages in the oven. So some sausages, and then I have like some fancy pasta. So nothing. I don't know,
like bow tie pasta.
Yeah, I mean it's like an artisan brand from the group. It's from the grocery store, so I don't know how fancy it actually is.
I hear Dale Barber makes a mean chicken cutlet.
Yeah.
This guy can do anything.
I'm gonna do it Barber style. Throw my camouflage army jacket and the
wait, does he wear an army jacket?
I don't think so. I'm just saying because he was in the army. I just picture him like with like.
It'd be funny if he wore a camouflage jacket.
I picture him as like one of the like a hippie, but who wears an army jacket. You know, I think that's a look like Rambo. Rambo's not a hippie, but he's like a anti-war. You know,
born on the 4th of July, kind of.
Exactly. Ron, whatever his name is, and but yeah, so I'm gonna cut up some of that sausage, put it in the pasta, and smear it with some pesto, and I think that'll be pretty good. I'm not much of a cook, but like. You know, that's for me. That's a pretty decent
Chef
meal,
Caffrey over here.
Chef I know. Yeah. Hey, we'll talk about Chef. All right. And I don't mean Boyardee. I mean Meth RD.
Meth RD. Dan Flieger, say hello and tell me, do you think Tom Cruise, star of Born on the 4th of July, would be good as Barbie?
Ooh, well, this is Dan Intergalactic Xbox Flieger. I did own a few Xboxes, so I did like that shout out. And I also like how the way my mom would refer to our system, she'd be like, if you boys don't behave, no more Nintendo. We never owned a Nintendo system, but it just sort of became like the brand, like Kleenex.
That's like her catch-all for video games.
Pretty much. Tom Cruise. Can I take Caffrey's question for dinner? Because I got Pizza Hut for the first time in a long time, and I got some chicken Alfredo and a Meat Lover's New York slice.
Ooh, all right.
I love like dog shit fast food pizza for real. Like it's such a specific thing.
It's a Ninja Turtles promotional package, so I just was like, fuck it.
Pizza Hut, King's Dominion, because they were the official sponsor of the Page Master starring Macaulay Culkin, which as we explored on this podcast,
oh my God,
has a strong connection to King's Dominion.
Very nice. I'm happy I brought it up.
Isn't there an episode? I wasn't on it, but wasn't there an episode on that like a long time ago?
It was an April Fool's episode, if that gives you a hint of
also
what we were up to with that episode.
Fleeger, you should go down to Pizza Hut after this episode and take your Book It hologram pin and get a sticker on it, because we just read a very big book. And
we should be rewarded for reading this. I feel like somebody should reward us.
Yeah. By a mediocre personal pan pizza, yeah. Yum, yum.
Okay, well, if you don't want to answer the Tom Cruise question...
I'll do it. I mean, I want to do the Tim Heidecker. When you got movies like Tom Cruise in them, you can't lose. But I think he might be a little old and too handsome to play Barbie. I just think that guy would be a natural leader, and you almost have to like uglify him a little bit to be a more accurate
everyone wants
Barbie.
to bang him.
Yeah,
true. But not as like a god.
But what about Tom,
like
like 80s, like late 80s, early 90s? Like
Cocktail.
Before he got his teeth fixed, yes.
Yeah.
Well, isn't Barbie supposed to be like in his 20s?
I think so.
Good question. He reads older to me.
He reads older to me, but then they said that Julia's like 12 years older than him or 13 years older than him, and she's 40. So
let's see.
I pictured him as like 45 years old.
Yeah, me too.
I guess mid-30s for me, but yeah.
Let's see who's Mike. Oh, Mike Vogel from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the remake.
Which one? There's like 8 of them.
The original remake.
Yeah, Platinum Dunes one. He's
I like
the guy
Jessica Biel.
I like the one dirty. where Leatherface killed all those people on a party bus and was like holding their severed arms in his hand. It was really
that's
funny.
the new one. So he's 43. When did Under the Dome end?
Like I don't know, 2 decades ago.
He's
7
a
years
young
ago. Yeah,
43.
So he was... Oh, sorry. What did you say, Ashley?
I said he's a young 43.
Yeah,
but I guess he's
young.
43 now, and this was a while ago.
He's like Hollywood 43, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, he was probably like our age when he did Under the Dome. I think I might be wrong. Maybe a little bit younger. But either way, not 45 when he did Under the Dome. So I guess.
So he was 21 when he did Under the Dome.
Yeah, exactly.
Ashley, say hello and tell us who would you cast as Barbie?
Hi, hello. This is Ashley feeling it, Cassidy. And who would I honestly, we'll get into Barbie. I think Mike Vogel is kind of good casting because he's, no offense to Mike Vogel, a little bit boring.
Okay.
And I think Barbie is kind of boring. And no hate. We'll get to it. We'll talk about it. No hate to him being a boring character.
But don't you want an actor that will de-borify him?
I mean, maybe, but I think Tom Cruise is way too charismatic. That dome would have come down in 25 minutes if Tom Cruise was there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he would have driven a motorcycle through it.
Well, he'd also be able to communicate with the aliens right off the bat.
He would.
Too, right?
True.
That's true.
So I know what Ash was saying, because it's like, because he's boring, but he's not bad. Like, he's not a bad actor, so that's a good
way.
Like,
yeah.
way.
Yeah,
like,
good balance.
You know?
He's just a guy.
Okay, I dig that. Okay, cool. Before we talk about characters, though, I do want to do a brief little detour into everybody's favorite section, structure and format. Very interesting section on this podcast, because sometimes King does do wild stuff with his prose. He does like to experiment. I think about like Dolores Claiborne, stuff like that. But other times he's just a pretty straightforward writer, and I think he kind of just goes with the flow. So this is one, I guess I would call it pretty straightforward. It's a lot of short chapters, a lot of short sub-chapters in there, and a lot of, relatively simple chapter titles. It's also kind of a departure from other books where sometimes he'll, like, I think about Low Men in Yellow Coats, where he's sort of like, he does the Brechtian thing of like listing all the things that are going to happen in the chapter, and then he begins the chapter. I think he does that in Fairy Tale too. I could be wrong though. But I think that this one, though, it's a lot more straightforward, but there is a sort of, I guess what I did want to talk about in regards to this book is there is a sort of mild cheekiness that I detected in the narration. This is very much a book where, and King does like to do this, where the narrator isn't omniscient. It's mostly omniscient, but there is a glint in the eye. Do you know what I mean? Would you guys agree with that? Like, how would you sort of characterize the narration of this book?
Yeah, I think so. I'm thinking about just that woodchuck chapter. I feel like it comes out when he talks about animals in a weird way. It's because he's not doing the thing of like, oh, it was the last meal he'd ever have or something like that.
He did a couple. Right? There was a couple of those.
Oh, were there? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but wouldn't that be? I guess like, what's the difference for you between that and omniscient?
Okay. No. It is omniscient. I didn't want to say it isn't. I guess when I said omniscient, I just sort of meant like unfeeling or no sort of like personal presence. Like,
oh, totally.
Whereas I said it, I think about Black House, right? You guys were on that up, I believe. The boys were. That episode, to me, that was a very intentional, where the narrators were kind of having fun, because it was Peter Straub and Stephen King. And there was a lot of like almost in-jokes that were happening, or not in-jokes so much as like very vivid descriptions that were meant to evoke a certain bemused distance. And I think that there's a little bit of that going on here. I think specifically, and I agree, the animal chapters are big for that, because there is this he really enjoys doing that clearly, and his personality starts to come out a little bit more. But then also there's like these montage chapters, and those ones felt very much like the beginning of Black House, where it's like a camera is like swooping throughout the town.
Well, and I wondered if that was supposed to be the view of the Leatherheads, because it didn't, the language wasn't right, because we do get a conversation with a Leatherhead in the end. It's very disjointed. It's very like, you know, there's a language barrier basically between us and them. So the language isn't right to be them, but it kind of felt like what they were doing. Like, I remember there was one chapter, like you said, where it was almost like a camera was going into the town, and he would kind of go into, and he's like, he stops at like Big Jim, like giving some sort of speech. And he was like, we don't need to hear this. We're going to hear his speech tomorrow. You know what I mean? And then he goes to Barbie's cell and sees what Barbie's doing in his cell. I loved it. It was so cinematic and so cool. And I did think, like, I wonder if this is supposed to be kind of what the Leatherheads are, how they're watching it play out.
Oh, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah. And that kind of ties into, I think, the larger idea that I had is, you know, we talked a lot in the previous episode, or at least I did, about the idea of one of the fears, I think, that is baked into this book is the idea that God is less of a benevolent figure than an ambivalent figure. And I think that with his narration, that sort of bemused distance that I discussed earlier, where there does kind of feel like we're observing from outside the dome in, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there is this marked remove, I think, between King and these characters. And I think that does tie to a lot of the themes that we talked about yesterday, where, you know, there's not a strong moral center to this book. There's not a strong sense of empathy there is baked into the themes, but I do think that, you know, you used the word petty, Dan, to describe it. We also used the word cruel. There's an unfeeling quality. And
hurricane or tornado warning, but we can keep going.
We'll leave that in the episode.
Yay.
No, Kyle, leave it in. We're
scary,
in the middle of a tornado.
I'm going to endure, though, for the fans.
Thank you.
Maybe.
Go ahead, Ashley.
No, I was just going to say, maybe that's why it was so easy for him to just kill him. Because he's talked before about how he's like, I don't want anything bad to happen to some of these characters. And in this book, he was like, I want something bad to happen to all the characters.
Yeah, so I guess that's what I'm getting at, is I don't think this is a fully formed thing throughout the narration. I think it might get exhausting if he tried to sustain that across 1,000 so pages. But, you know, I think there's enough moments where we get the vibe that King is sort of an ambivalent narrator for this story that I do think serves the themes of the book a little bit. And King tends to do this with his narration, where it's rare that he really, because he doesn't write a lot of first person stories, you know, and when he does, I feel like that's where he you know, obviously he's blending himself with the character to a great deal, but he does tend to throw in, even in the third person stories, a couple eyes now and then. He doesn't do it in this book, but he does it in others. And I feel like there's almost a sloppiness to King narration that I find kind of charming. And I don't know. I think it's an idea to just consider as we keep moving forward, because I think that he's one of the only authors in America that's allowed to play fast and loose with narration like that, where he can throw in these little things like, I don't know, like when he jumps into the animals' bodies and he kind of becomes a different narrator, or when, you know, he's like, we don't need to listen to Big Jim, that's kind of boring. And he does the same kind of stuff in Black House, which I think was, to me, the closest sort of parallel to this in terms of narration.
It almost feels like reminiscent of Ray Bradbury a little bit, who is one of King's heroes, obviously. And it's funny because he actually criticizes Ray Bradbury a little bit for that kind of familiarity in Dance Macabre. He talks about the intro to Something Wicked This Way Comes, where Ray Bradbury's saying, like, well, Jim's just the highest peach on the tree, just kind of that almost like we say that word folksy a lot. But I can't help but think he took it from him, because that's very much something Bradbury does whenever he describes a small town. It's kind of that, like, we'll get to him later. Now moving on, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I like it though.
Yeah, King. I think if King is criticizing him for that, he is also very guilty of it.
He's calling the kettle black.
Well, I think that serves as a nice segue into heroes and villains.
I'm gonna have to kill this fucking clown. Welcome to the Losers Club, asshole!
Okay, because I think that King has a huge crush on Barbie. And that's where we're going to start, with Barbie. And Barbie is a character that King has said in interviews that, he's like, well, that's the character I felt closest to. It's sort of, I think, the character that represents his point of view, at least a more like balanced and not, power hungry or spineless kind of point of view. Like or at least it's the best version of who King, I think, wishes or would want to be in a situation like this, which is perhaps why the character comes across as so almost comically, ridiculously good. And because I almost said heroic, but then I almost don't want to say that, because Barbie is I don't know if he's heroic, but he is brave. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
I don't know.
He's level-headed.
Yeah.
He's really level-headed. And what I had said earlier about him being boring, I think boring kind of works for Barbie, because Barbie's almost just there. And I don't hate that. Like, this book is supposed to be about real people in a real town that get stuck in an extraordinary situation. So Barbie not being this larger-than-life guy really works for me. He's just your average ex-Marine short-order cook trying to get out of town. Like, he's just kind of, like, found himself in this situation, and everything he does is, every move he makes is just to try and get out of this situation. But there's no ulterior motives.
Right.
It's
funny that his name's Barbie, because he's more like a G.I. Joe to me a little bit. Even just like the picture.
Well, I was going to say, I always, in my mind's eye, I pictured him as looking like the actor Justin Kirk. And not as sly, but just that sort of like, not leading man handsome, but, handsome enough and maybe hiding a little bit behind his smile. But
the dude from Weeds?
Yeah, the guy from Weeds and like recently Succession. I've always thought that guy, like, he looks cool, but not in an overwhelming G.I. Joe way even. But I do think, like, as a guy, you kind of am like, you picture like these guys that you're like, man, that guy's just cool. Like, I wish we could hang out more. And it reminds me with the way King approaches it that I Think You Should Leave sketch, where Tim writes the song about his future son-in-law. And he's just like, oh, the guy's so cool. And like, he'll take my daughter out and they'll dance and she'll love it. It's just like that kind of worship of his own fictional creation.
Well, that's the thing, is I feel like it gets on my nerves, because I think he likes the character and he admires the character too much. I think I was trying to stab at this yesterday, and I'm going to try again today. It's because I think about Alan Pangborn, who is, to me, like a really interesting, noble, but flawed figure. And that flaw that's in Alan carries through the whole narrative. And some of that's helped by the fact that he's in other books. So he's got a lot of history that he brings into a book like Needful Things. Ashley, we talked about that a lot yesterday. The idea that if there is something that kind of hinders Barbie, perhaps it's that he doesn't have a lot of existing relationships with people in town, or they're very shallow ones. And we watched some of them develop. And I do think that, I will say, I liked the little love story with him and Julia. I think I responded to that a little more on this read than I did last time, because King is very good, I think, at writing, initial sparks, like romance, right? And but I do think that Barbie, I guess I ask myself, like, because when you think about the basic building blocks of narrative and how to build a character, you say, what does the character want? And what is the sort of big choice that he has to make? How does he grow and change by the end of the story? And I was hitting walls when I was trying to think about that with Barbie. I think Barbie is a very simple, once the dome falls, he's got, well, I'm going to get out from under the dome. That's the goal. But, and I think it's the same with like Alan Pangborn, though. It's like, well, I'm going to save people from Leland Gaunt. But there's also the existing story that exists alongside Alan Pangborn that, helps illuminate him deeper as a person. That's where I don't feel like we have that with Barbie. He almost
we
feels
don't have
like,
a lot of side stories happening.
yeah, he's just this guy who was in the military and he did some bad stuff in the military, and now
sort of. He witnessed. He bore witness to bad stuff in the military that he like feels bad about. But yeah, we don't really see him do anything. It would have been nice if he had done maybe something shady to get out of something, or you know what I mean? Like everything he did. If
he actually did bang Angie McCain, right?
Yeah, there's that. Well, he did kind of like shove that in his face. He pretended like he did for a moment.
Yeah.
And called her like a sweet peach or some shit like that. But
yeah, I guess like for me, I just want I'm okay with him being good at everything, because that's the thing about Barbie is he's good at everything.
Great at everything.
Which I know, Kath, that's like a running joke with us about characters that we find funny who are like, oh, they can do everything. Like, he can sing, he can dance. But it's like, but I think that's my thing with Barbie is I just wish there was a little more edge to him, because like you said, he didn't, like, I would respond to the character more if he was the one who had done the, well, and they do imply that he did do some torturing and like information extraction, but they don't get into it at all. Like, we have no concept of what it was. And I think he was probably inspired a lot by Saeed on Lost, because I know he was obsessed with it, like while he was writing this book and around that time. And so I imagine he was thinking a lot about that character, but that character like had more edge to him than Barbie does. And that was a network TV show. You know what I mean? It's like if Barbie had been the one who, I don't want to say killed a guy, because that gets pretty dark, but if he had at least like had some darkness there, or like I said, if he had actually banged Angie and the guys had a good reason to be mad at him, like those are the things that I think would have given that character just one more level of dimension. Because for me, he just feels like a character that is there to be the anchor for all the other good guys. You know what I mean? I mean, he even puts him in a jail cell for like the whole middle of the book.
Yeah, like a fourth of the book he's in prison.
Right. And it's like, I was
gonna say, like, I think even if it was like something like he helped unlock a door that led to some disaster, even if it was some action that was accidental that helped enable the destruction. But I really do view him as like a tumbleweed. Even in the beginning, he's trying to hitchhike and he's like, I wonder if I would have gotten in the car, what would have happened? And he does kind of just sort of coast from one thing to the other. So yeah, there really isn't any sort of dynamic character arc that he has. He just kind of exists. And again, I mean, it's pretty amazing, like kind of what Ashley was saying, for a 1,000-page book that has a lot of side stories, there's really not many about him at all, right?
I know.
I mean, and I think that, I don't know though, I think that didn't bother me because, like I was saying yesterday, everything is so brief, you know what I mean? So he does feel like sort of this bland center, which I don't necessarily mind. Like, I feel like I would, if we were with him for so long or had internal monologue for him or whatever else, I would probably be like, okay, dude, like what's your deal, right? It's funny because I'm reading the LA Quartet by James Ellroy right now, and with that it's the opposite. Like every character has something like horrible they've done, like really bad they've done, which is great. But it's funny because that actually can get kind of taxing after a while too. You're like, oh my god, like everyone's a fucking murderer or like it just has this involved backstory. And I think because King has that kind of Altman approach where we get so many other characters. I mean, in a weird way, someone like Thurston Marshall undergoes more change than Barbie does, right? I mean, kind of a lot of change. And so I think because we're getting it elsewhere, I don't know. I kind of like him just being a mid-action hero, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, maybe he's our entry into it, where it's like he's our everyman. He's the one that we can put ourselves in the dome as him, because there's no, major thing about him that makes him stand out. He is the everyman of this novel.
It's like in a video game when you just play it, you don't even see your character because it's like first person perspective.
Yeah, kind of.
Just a person going through the world.
Yeah, you're Barbie. We're all Barbie.
We're all under the dome and we're all Bobby.
Do you guys think, Ashley, you were on the Just After Sunset episode, and there's that story, Rest Stop, where it's King imagining him. I think it was like, spoiler alert, if anyone hasn't listened, it's like their least favorite story. But you guys talked about how, this is clearly like King wishing he could do these things, because it's about like a nebbish author who takes on an alter ego to help this woman. I mean, the story doesn't really take its gimmick far enough, but that's the basic premise
kind
of it.
of, yeah.
And so I wonder if, I mean, but that character is a lot darker than Barbie is, but I don't know. Maybe King was just in that mode of like, oh yeah, let's try on this skin. But I feel like we say that a lot about characters like Ben Mears and Mike Noonan, right? I feel like this isn't the first time where we're like, oh, King clearly like is aspiring to something here a little bit, maybe subconsciously.
The thing about someone like Ben Mears and especially Mike Noonan who are characters that King sees himself as. Like he said very specifically that Mike Noonan was
well,
him.
They have fears, I guess, and they're facing down something, and they do have backstory, you know.
Especially Bag of Bones. Mike Noonan is a very deep, complex character, yes. Even though I found him very insufferable. It's like that is a character who has a really deep, rich inner life, and is really the thing is what I think is interesting, and I think this has to do, you know. And I'm not like trashing Barbie. I don't hate Barbie.
I love Barbie.
I think
he's boring, but I
think he's functional. But it's like King has a complete disinterest in exploring Barbie, which is that's why I feel like I talked yesterday about how when the Iraq stuff comes up at the end of the book, it almost feels a little jarring because we haven't spent a lot of time with that information earlier in the book. And that's where I see King's disinterest in developing the character because, you know, like he said, he wanted this to be about story more than anything. And Barbie is nothing if not, you know, a wheel of this bus that is moving forward. He is, you know, one of the main movers of plot in this book. That is his main function. And so I think it makes sense that King wasn't interested in exploring his inner life. But then when he needed to at the end of the book, when he needed more strings to tie together for this to have like some kind of thematic weight, that's when he's like, okay, I got to actually do something with this guy.
Would it have been more interesting if Barbie wasn't this? I mean, it's not like he was a war hero, but would it have been more interesting if Barbie had like gone AWOL or deserted his troop or something, and then this is his moment to prove his worth or you know, prove that he's a good guy or prove that he can help other people? I don't know. That might have been more interesting. Maybe we could have seen it in like dream sequences because we'd never see anything that's not under the dome.
Yeah, I think it's more like because then Colonel Cox, because Colonel Cox is like, you're a damn fine soldier.
Damn fine soldier.
And I'm just kind of like, it'd be more interesting if he's like, I'm stuck with you in there. All right. You know, that's a more interesting dynamic. So go ahead, Fleeger.
So, do you think like, because you said the original manuscript, it was 500 more pages. Do you think maybe Barbie did get kind of more fleshed out within those? Like, I don't know if anyone's ever had access to those, but I'd be very interested to read those one day.
No, that might be true.
I have. He actually like accidentally snipes a kid over in
damn, that makes sense.
Damn.
No, I mean, it is funny though, because you would think because the ending of the book does have to do with appealing to aliens' compassion, getting them not to torture things, right? I don't want to tell King how to write his novel, but you think he would have leaned harder on that of like, say Barbie did actively torture people in Iraq and he's trying to get over that. Maybe he's the one who has to appeal to the alien's compassion and then also admit his own sins or something like that.
Right.
I mean, they do tie to other characters' backstories kind of nicely, but he is the protagonist. That could have been one way to like, there maybe could have, and he does connect it a little bit, like you said, but there could have been a meatier connection between, especially if King really wants to lean into the political satire, there could have been a much meatier connection to what we did to like, not even just in that war, but in every war, what we do to prisoners, right? And compared to what
I was going to say, when he wrote this, I don't even think it had been disclosed yet what we had done to Iraqi.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Had that been?
I think it had.
No, it had been.
I guess we like the bag on the head.
Abu Ghraib had been, because I remember making a joke about it when I was still in college. So.
Oh, that's really cool.
Well, like social media. Hey, I'm just social satire.
It was satire, Dan.
The satirist. The satirist.
The satirist. Yeah, no, I think and I think we can do. I'm essentially just kind of doing what ifs, but because the thing is, the book is satisfying, and
totally.
It's just like I think there could have been one extra layer with this character, because King is usually very good with his, like, I feel like a bad King, or not bad, like an uninteresting King protagonist is more rare than anything. I feel like his protagonists are usually, even if like Mike Noonan is not a character I love spending a lot of time with, but he's an interesting character. Like, he's well written. There's an interest in his inner life. And I think with Barbie, here's King's quote about him. This is the only time I really saw him address this character, he was talking about, you know, like him being kind of an observer in the sense that he could see some of the consequences of on the horizon of the dome. And King said, I think it's good to have a character people can root for that seems like a regular guy. In any kind of disaster situation, it's hard to look ahead, but somebody has to try to do that. And in the case of Under the Dome, it's Dale. He's an army guy. That's like literally all he really says about him. So I think for him, it was, you know, a character that was, again, an everyman, like you said. I think it's a good way to put it. And somebody who was handsome so there could be a little bit of romance, and somebody for the kids to look up to, and somebody who could win in a fight against some of these bad boys. You know, I think that's all King really needed from Barbie, and he got it from him. So any other thoughts on our old friend Dale? Okay, cool. Let's talk about somebody who King is a lot more interested in, and that's Big Jim Rennie.
Oh, boy.
I'm going to read some quotes from King about Big Jim. That was the only quote I found about Barbie. I have a handful of quotes here and I am only choosing a couple. He talked about him a lot in interviews. He said Jim Rennie is a hypocrite. That was kind of the basis in the way he talked about that character. He also said, and this was in an interview with NPR's The Book Show. He said, the major thing with Jim Rennie is that he believes he is the best possible thing for the town, which is true of any leader who tries to seize power. How far would someone like that go, and what would good people do to stop that? And then he added, the important thing to remember is that these guys are heroes to themselves. I'm doing this for the good of the town. And King says there's some truth to that, in his own mind, at least. That's how they justify it to themselves. And so I think that's an interesting way to look at it, in that, because I have this other quote I want to read really quick too. Let me see if I can find it. And this is him just talking about the characters in general. Damn, I can't. Wait, hold on. I might be able to find it here.
Why don't you check your notes there, son?
I can't find it, but basically he said he didn't want anybody in the book to be a quote unquote Snidely Whiplash kind of villain. And I think I laughed when I read that, because I was like, Jim Rennie is absolutely a Snidely Whiplash kind of villain, because he's so fucking evil. But I think the difference is that in King's parlance and the way that he's describing it, is Snidely Whiplash is somebody who is like, I am doing evil because I love evil. You know, I want to hurt people. And I think Rennie is the kind of guy who is like, and I have some quotes here to kind of elaborate on this. Is he someone who is essentially saying, I'm the best person for this job, and if I need to rough a couple people up to make them realize that, it'll be better for them in the end, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think that,
yeah, go ahead.
Especially, that's definitely him before the dome comes down. He really does think that everything he does is for the good of the town. He does this for the town. He's that kind of guy. And then the dome falls, and it starts off that way. But then I think he gets panicked. Mm-hmm. And he starts doing worse and worse and worse and worse things, because he has to cover up all the bad things he was doing for the good of the town, because he would lose favor with the townspeople if they found out what he was doing. So, like, yes, I do think that I think he becomes almost a Snidely Whiplash character towards the end, because then it's all about, like, saving his own ass.
I'll agree with you to a point. I will disagree in the sense that when the dome comes down, I think he sees that, he doesn't panic about the dome. He sees that as an opportunity.
The dome for Big Jim Rennie was 9/11 for Dick Cheney.
Fuck yeah.
It was like, cha-ching, cha-ching, hell yeah, this is my opportunity to make a lot of money.
Absolutely.
And, you know.
And that is something I want to talk about too later, is the shadow of 9/11 as it affects these characters.
For sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
I think using that, like, that little finger quote, though, of chaos is a ladder, he does immediately recognize now's the time to throw my weight round. He appoints the police, the brown shirts, if you will. And he really does kind of take control of the situation. And I know he has ideas for, like, upward mobility, but it is funny where it's like, oh, you're the third selectman. I didn't even necessarily know what a selectman was until I read this book and I had to look it up. I'm like, I guess city council member, more or less, right? But he does assess the situation quickly. And he also is under he doesn't know when the dome is going to go away. No one does, but everyone's hopeful. Whereas he's kind of like, we might be here for a while. And he's kind of getting his ducks in a row just in case.
I think he's hoping for it.
Yeah. And I do wonder because, he's very Christian. He makes a lot of comments about going to heaven. He can quote the Bible, but it's like, the devil can quote scripture as well. Does he really believe it? Or is he, I think there's a part of him that does believe it, but only because it sort of serves his own ego that, I will be in heaven one day because I'm so deserving. Because he does make a comment at the end, eating mash and that roast beef, but he even says like, he doesn't want to like sit next to Jesus. He wants to sit at the head of the table. And that kind of gives it all away, I guess.
Yeah, I want to read a couple quotes here that I think will elaborate upon what you guys are saying. This is early in the book, like probably the first 150 pages. Andy is sort of thinking about Jim, and he goes, if he asked Big Jim, Andy knew what the answer would be. The ends sometimes, and this is about the crimes that they've been committing, the ends sometimes justify the means. The ends in this case had seemed admirable once upon a time. The new Holy Redeemer Church, the old one had been little more than a clapboard shack with a wooden cross on top. The radio station that had saved only God knew how many souls, the 10% they tithed prudently, the contribution checks issued from a bank in the Cayman Islands, to the Lord Jesus Missionary Society to help what Pastor Coggins liked to call the Little Brown Brothers. God, that's so true for these kinds of people. And then I want to read this next section as well, which relates to the notions of God, I think. I love this. Big Jim raised a blunt-fingered hand to the declining sun that seemed to be spreading across the western sky like a great poisoned egg. You think all this is our fault somehow, that God is punishing us for propping up the town when times were hard. That's just not true, pal. This isn't God's work. If you wanted to say getting beat in Vietnam was God's work, God's warning that America was losing her spiritual way, I'd have to agree with you. If you were to say that 9/11 was the supreme being's response to our Supreme Court telling little children they could no longer start their day with a prayer to the God who made them, I'd have to go along. But God punishing Chester's Mill because we didn't want to end up just another moribund wide spot in the road like Jay or Millinocket? He shook his head. No, sir, no. And then Andy says, we also put some pretty good change in our own pockets. Jim says, well, the narration says they had done more than prop up their own businesses and extend a helping hand to the Little Brown Brothers. Andy had his own account in the Cayman Islands, and for every dollar Andy had, or the Bowies for that matter, he was willing to bet that Big Jim had put away 3, maybe even 4. The workman is worthy of his hire, Big Jim said in a pedantic but kindly tone. Matthew 10:10. He neglected to cite the previous verse, provide neither gold nor silver, no brass in your purses. And then he even finds a biblical explanation for the methamphetamine, which I found very, very funny. This is a short little section. Why did Big Jim let the chef make so fucking much, Fern wondered. And why did we go along? What were we thinking of? He could come up with no answer to this question but the obvious one, because they could. The combination of Bushy's genius and all of those cheap Chinese ingredients had intoxicated them. Also, it funded the CIK Corporation, which was doing God's work all up and down the East Coast. When anyone questioned, Big Jim always pointed this out, and he would quote scripture, "For the laborer is worthy of his hire." Gospel of Luke. And thou shalt not muzzle the ox while he is threshing. 1 Timothy. Fern had never gotten to that verse. So anyways, I do think that it's a really fun commentary on the ways in which the Bible can be used and scripture can be sort of manipulated in order to justify literally anything.
Totally.
With these people. And so, yeah, and I think another wrinkle that does make Big Jim a little more interesting is that he talks so much about saving the town, right? And Andy points out that his pharmacy would have closed by now if not for the drug money. And there is the implication that a lot of other businesses would have closed if not for the drug money. But then we learn later that a lot of like basic town services were being neglected. So there was this sense that the drugs were helping, because I think a lot about, the small town in America sort of dying under the weight of, late capitalism and everything, which is obviously something that is happening. And there is this notion that like, well, we need to do whatever we can to keep these communities alive. Mm-hmm. But then in this instance, that excuse rings hollow because several characters bring up multiple times about how so many basic services that the ones that basically serve the poor people in the community those are not getting that love. They're
or
not
like
getting that
the
money.
oxygen in the ambulances
Mhm.
that was
Yep.
expired and stuff like that. Yeah, Big Jim had no problem saving the people of the town as long as they did whatever he wanted them to do.
And as long as they were making money. you
Yeah.
know?
It reminds me too of like when Turkey just had some of those massive earthquakes like a year ago. Maybe they're just come under threat of tornado at the moment, but they found out after that the disaster fund for the recovery had actually all been like swindled and taken, right? So even this, like, yeah, they're using the pharmacy to get this money, but they're really just letting everything else fall apart, right? While they just stuff their pockets. So sadly, it is something that plays out on a much larger scale.
Look at PPP loans during the pandemic. Like how many fucking fraud stories have come out of that? I mean, the whole, like, my wife and I kind of learned in the aftermath of, or at least in the, the last year or so, pretty much all the COVID clinics that popped up around our place in Chicago, almost every one of them was outed for some kind of fraud. Like everyone pounced on that money to make as much money as they could for themselves.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's
there's no
so
reason for
depressing.
Kanye West to have a PPP loan during like he can take 2 years off of work and not have to make a penny and he can pay all of his bills. You know what I mean? Like
I got a feeling he might be taking more than 2 years going forward off work, but we shall see.
Well, when Steven, like I know him, when King
Stevie.
said, when Stevie called him a hypocrite, that's what I wrote in my notes the most. Like he's a big, fat fucking hypocrite. He, especially with all the he calls the local bar the sin pit. He gets on people for like cursing around him, and he does fake cursing, which is the worst kind of cursing. Like if you're gonna curse, what does he call cluster mug? Rhymes with witch. He won't say bitch. With witch. And he's a racist. We know he drives a Hummer. He's a
murderer too.
Well, that's the thing. Is like he's doing all these things and he's being so godly, and then he murders like super easy. And he killed his wife, right?
Yeah,
he put a pillow over his wife's
head.
Yeah,
and that's so interesting because he finds a way to justify that both spiritually and maritally. While it was literally just self-interest, because he's like, I just want her to be, I want this to be over.
Yeah, I want this to be over. I'm just going to kill her.
I actually love the contrast between him and Junior, because we spent a lot of time with Junior and we're introduced to Junior being necrophilic and also murdering, women. And obviously they're both horrible, but it's interesting because I think Jim looks at Junior like this liability, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about why Junior's actually murdering, some of it has to do with how he was raised, obviously. But then he has this thing going on in his head that, Junior's still a bad dude. Let's not dance around that.
Oh, yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is it's funny because I think Jim probably thinks of himself as the more civilized one, the one who has to keep his son in check. But I think if we tally the deaths, he probably kills way more people than Junior does. So, and that's and I think that's very much on purpose. Well, and I just love that contrast, how King is painting these two very different types of villains who are directly related to each other.
Yeah, and I think with Big Jim, like his force of will is just, it can move mountains, right? He gets people to do what he wants, and if they push back at all, he just like intimidates them down. Whereas Junior, if you remember the scene when he's like, you bet you salt your bread, don't you? And he just keeps, he doesn't have any other strategy than just, I'm just going to keep going. Whereas Big Jim will have a few different pathways, and he also understands that you get more flies with honey than vinegar, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes he charms and manipulates.
He knows how to sweet talk,
right? And other times, he does, when he has to get that bad, he becomes the big bad wolf. But even just like the politician quality he has, where the food riots, and he refers to it as a food fight.
Yeah, and
that's such a political thing to do. Of like, people were seriously hurt there. That was a devastating thing, and it's like, oh, that was just a little food fight.
Well, and I think it's interesting too that even Jim understands that he's sort of a small time tyrant, because, and I think King is always very interested in this notion of people who perhaps like dream of becoming a fascist leader, but they know that they don't have the juice to make it on like the national scale.
Mm-hmm.
And I say dream of being a fascist leader. Obviously, they don't think that they're going to become a monster, but they want power. But I thought this was an interesting detail. The Big Jim is remembering somebody in town whose last name or first name was Hannah, who was a really good, I think, ball player of some kind. And then they got injured. And basically he's like, it's not a big deal that she got injured. He goes, Hannah never would have played college ball, he suspected. There, the girls were bigger and she might have been reduced to role player status. She never would have stood for that. Her hate had to be fed by constant action on the floor. Big Jim understood completely. He sympathized completely. It was the main reason he had never even considered leaving the mill. In the wider world, he might have made more money, but wealth was the short beer of existence. Power was champagne. So it's like he was much happier being the big fish in the small pond.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I do love that he liked girls basketball.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and his
Fun little
That's
detail.
a funny little detail that he's just like really into high school girls basketball.
And I love for it's like not for the reason you would think, because at first I'm like, oh great, like they're making it.
No, he's like, they're scrappy.
Like,
It's like they're more aggressive than the men because there's not necessarily the superstar, so they have to fight tooth and nail, and he just loves that.
Yeah, he's savage.
Yeah, I'm glad he didn't do some like pedophile thing because I feel like that's almost becoming shorthand. Did anybody watch The Last of Us? There was a scene in Last of Us, and I played the video game, and they took a character from the video game who was already plenty evil, and then in the show, because they didn't think he was evil enough, they made him like a pedophile as well. And I was like, you don't need to go that far.
It is the cheap thing if like you're establishing a character, and you make them either like a sex criminal, a racist Nazi. It's just like shorthand is the perfect word for it, Randall. It's just rather than develop the character, I'll just do this and people will fill in the blanks, make right, he's evil. So yeah, that was a big surprise because I forgot the high school basketball thing. And like you, as I was reading it, I was like, oh good, and then I was like, oh okay, it actually is different, not necessarily for a better, I mean, I guess that is a better reason, but still not a good reason that he is entertained by like this gladiator sport at the local high school.
Yeah. And I have one more quote here. This is near not the end of the book, but I think probably about 3/4 in. This was to me really interesting, and I think it really speaks to King's idea of Rennie seeing himself as, a good guy, as the hero, even though he carries a lot of resentment for the people in the town. Because I do think it's interesting. He talks about, everyone in the book does their ants moment because King really hammers home the idea that we're all worker ants. And Jim has that moment too, but then he distinguishes. He says, okay, there's worker ants, but then there's also grasshoppers, and then there's also locusts. And I want to talk about the locust thing a little bit later, but it's like he is somebody who that I think is the difference is if you really do believe in a community, then you do see everyone as equal. Like we're all part of the same thing. We're all under the dome together, right? Like we're all the same species and we're working together. But he is somebody who very much is like, I got my people who are my fellow worker ants, and then we've got these other insects who are either
mooching.
Mooching, or what's what I'm looking for, like parasitic, or they're out to get us. Like he's so obsessed with sides, right? Like who's on this side, who's on Dale's side, who's on my side. He goes there instantly, which I think is also interesting because I mean, one of the most famous quotes to come out of the Bush presidency was, you're either with us or you're against us when it came to the war, which was, one of the most damaging things that could ever be said on a public stage. But this quote is really interesting. He says, God loved them. God must love them because the majority are too dumb to work and too nervous to steal. That's what we've got to deal with. The mob, the cotton-picking rabble. What do they want, Carter? And Carter says, I don't know, boss. And he says, sure you do. They want food, Oprah, country music, and a warm bed to thump uglies in when the sun goes down so they can make more just like them. And goodness me, here comes another member of the tribe. It was Chief Randolph, blah, blah, blah. And then he says, our job, Carter, is to take care of them. We may not like it. We may not always think they're worth it, but it's the job God gave us. Only only to do it, we have to take care of ourselves first. And that's why a good deal of fresh fruit and veg from Food City was stored in the town clerk's office 2 days ago. You didn't know that, did you? Well, that's all right. You're a step ahead of them, and I'm a step ahead of you. And that's how it's supposed to be. The lesson is simple. The Lord helps those that help themselves. Yeah, I love that quote because I think it really does sum up, and it really does get at, I think, prosperity gospel too, to its degree, which is obviously the preeminent form of Christianity in so many circles these days, which is, you got guys like Kenneth Copeland who will spit 30 different Bible verses at you about why it's good that they have a private jet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or you've got Joel Osteen who can give you 10 Bible verses as to why he won't house people in his church when there's flooding going on. You know what I mean? There's a million different ways that these people can justify this stuff.
And can I say too, we talked about his death a little bit on the previous episode, but I do think it is very fitting that he dies alone, because you think about all Big Jim's power comes from his ability to manipulate those around him. Even at the end, he could have died with someone else. I think he referred to Carter as almost like a surrogate son at one point. He was just a little bit smarter than some of the other ones. But even then, at the end, he has to kill that guy too. So all his power for nothing, he dies alone pretty pathetically. And it's even his own body that betrays him. So even Big Jim betrayed himself in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, and Ashley, we talked about this yesterday, is that the initial deflation that we didn't get the big scene. But it's so fitting for that character because, when you build your little kingdom and you sacrifice everyone in your wake to get there, in the end, you can have the biggest, most beautiful house in the world and you can be safe from the poison gas outside. But, that's not going to save you in the end.
And it also reminds me of like recently, God bless them, R.I.P., the billionaires that were.
Oh, the Titanic.
Going down the Titanic.
Stockton Rush.
But these guys went down, these billionaires, and everyone was like, oh, his stepson is like online asking, women to sit on his face and going to a Blink-182 concert. And at some point it's like, do you want to be a billionaire or do you want to know what love is? Because sometimes you do so much to get so much power and so much money that you lose everything else. Like no one actually loves Big Jim Rennie. His son talks about how he's going to kill him.
Yeah,
several times in the book, he's like, well, I'll kill my dad, then I'll kill myself so I don't have to go to Shawshank. You know what I mean? Like he's constantly like talking about killing his own father. He has no one who loves him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an interesting way for us to, I want to fold Junior into this conversation now. We can still talk about Jim.
Yeah.
But Dan, I think you were 100% on the nose when you kind of talked about the similarity between, or the things that sort of bind together Big Jim and Junior. And I want to throw one other character in there, and that's the chef.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say too much because I know we'll probably want to talk about him a little more later. But for me, let me kind of break this down here. Well, first, let me start with Junior, the basics of him. I think he's a pretty weird character because I love him. He's great. And I've talked about him on this podcast a lot. But, he sort of begins as a Henry Bowers-esque character. He's very despicable. He's selfish. He's capable of tremendous violence. And then we learn like necrophilia. He begins as such a vicious character. But then King sort of works to soften him. He comes on so strong. And there's multiple ways that he does that. Dan, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to agree with you. I mean, I think because of how grotesque he is, and we assume it's only going to get worse, right? He almost sets him up like he's going to kill so many people in this town, and he is going to be the main villain. And he's really not. He's almost more symptomatic of everything that's going on. And he does cause more damage, but I think it's a really interesting choice that he doesn't escalate more. And
he becomes a chaos agent.
Exactly. Yeah. And I to me, it was just kind of a nice surprise because I like when King can do that. I like when it's like, okay, cool. No, Junior's, it's more about just like stowing the people he's already killed. Because even with the other policemen, Junior doesn't enact as much terror as they do.
Right.
And like Carter, I'd argue does. I mean, they're both like, sexual criminals and everything like that. But as far as like inflicting public damage on the town, I think Carter and Frank and all them do go way further than Junior does. Yeah, and I don't know. What do you guys think King was getting at with that?
So,
yeah,
I have a couple thoughts here. Like, because basically there's a couple different ways that he works to soften Junior. One is that he really does paint him as a victim of his dad's bullying.
Mm-hmm.
And we do see that he really secretly hates his dad. He's been treated like shit his whole life. So we get that aspect. And that still kind of aligns with Henry Bowers, who, you know, his dad was also very abusive.
Yeah.
And then we get the brain tumor. We find out that he has a glioblastoma, which I have people in my family who have had that. It's basically a death sentence, and it absolutely. And I, you know, was talking to my wife who knows a lot about it, and I was asking her some of the symptoms in Junior. I mean, obviously they're very much taken to the extreme in this book, but you know, on the basis sense, they're pretty accurate to what can happen in terms of seeing things that aren't there and so on and so forth. And then that ends up sort of, and you know, Dan, I think you're right in the sense that I don't think King is trying to blame all of these violent acts on the brain tumor at all. Junior is a bad dude, but the brain tumor does end up taking on a lot of the brunt of the blame for how violent he becomes. But then we also get this scene, and I'm sure you guys are all thinking about this, where he becomes overwhelmed with wanting to help the Appleton children. Like, there's that
like
scene where he
obsessed.
finds them in the road, and suddenly Junior, who we've literally seen, we've heard about him having sex with the dead bodies of 2 women that he's killed. Suddenly he sees these 2 children in the road and he's like, I love you, I have to help you. Was that jarring for anyone else, or did it work for you?
It made sense to me because they like, I don't remember exactly what happened in that scene that made him feel that way, but I remember him just talking about like, no one's ever treated me like that. Like I was needed in a situation. And he was like, I'll do anything to get it again. So I have to go find those kids and help them.
Yeah.
See, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
So I took it as a symbol of like lost childhood innocence, right? By rescuing them, he could rescue himself from his past, even though that's going to be impossible. But there's that moment, you know, it's like when a dictator comes out and like kisses a child or something, and you're like, yeah, but your actions are hurting this child in the long run. So maybe you had this moment of clarity, but it rings pretty hollow.
Yeah, what would you have actually done if you got a hold of those kids? Do you think you would have really been the best person to take care of them? And I think the reason that he wasn't as much of a terror on the town is that he didn't want to be anything like his father. All his father cared about was power, power, power. And I don't think he cared about that at all. I don't think he wanted power. And I don't, you know, I think he saw the behaviors of his father and decided he didn't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot, and I think that I want to revisit this notion a little bit later when talking about a different character, but I think that, you know, I love what you said, Ashley, about the kids representing a way to be useful for Junior. And I think that's something that we see with a lot of characters in this book. Andy, for example, when he links up with Chef, that, or not even like, it's when, remember, he's going to kill himself, and then they call him and they say, we need you to come to the hospital. And suddenly he's like, oh my God, like
someone
he's
needs
so
me.
much better because someone needs me and I'm actually useful for once. And then with Chef, he feels the same way. He's like, I have a mission and a purpose for the first time in so many years. And I am with someone. Like I talked about that quote in the last episode where he's like, I'm bonding with someone, you know? And I think that, that's, I think, what's going on with Junior to some degree too, which is that he's been caught up in this group of, you know, roughnecks, these bad boys. He grew up with a family of people who were self-interested. He didn't really know what it was like to be useful because he was handed a lot of things. He fucked up a lot of things, and he was surrounded by mean people. And I think what King is trying to get at with this character, to some degree, again, I'm not sure it's wholly successful, but that he is someone who really does long to be part of a community and to be useful, but he doesn't know what that looks like because, you know, until he has this moment where he does have power in the sense that he is a cop, like he suddenly has a badge and that gives him authority that he's never had before. And he has an opportunity to help someone rather than just like yell at people. Cause like, I think right before this is when he beats up the professor and his girlfriend, like, because their whole goal is to get them out of the cabin. And that is, you know, a job for thugs basically. Whereas the kids, they actually need help. And he goes, wait a minute, I'm in a position where I can help. So
do you guys, I won't name names or anything, but I don't know. I think about growing up, and when I think about, I guess, like stereotypically popular groups of like football players or whatever, like a gang of dudes, right? And especially ones who like to throw their weight around and flex and be alpha males. I feel like there's always like one weirdo in the group, if that makes sense. Like, at least I'm not gonna name names, but I
was the weirdo in my
yeah. You can just say it. It's Randall. Yeah.
Yeah. When growing up with Randall,
I'm still the weirdo in this group. Yeah.
What? No, but for real, like, and by that I mean it was like I feel like there was always one guy who like was kind of just lingering and not really talking too much and not being charming, but was just kind of there. And I don't know, maybe he was buff or something.
Yeah,
but
he was like a really good football player, so he was obviously like someone they wanted to have a part of their squad, but like didn't belong.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, and maybe wasn't. I'm not saying you have to be extroverted, but like, wasn't like a talker. Maybe wasn't conventionally good looking. I feel like that's a very accurate thing whenever you get a group of guys like over, 4 people large or something like that.
Yeah, and I think also that trying to be like his father in a lot of ways and seeing how his father keeps people that are loyal to him, and because even when he has the girlfriends, there's a whole psychosexual thing, but some of it is he's just like laying with them and just kind of being in their presence. And it's like he just wants affection and company. And when he's mad at the woman in the beginning, which is one of the most brutal kills I've ever read.
Oh, yeah.
It's nasty.
But he's like remembers her smiling and growing up and being a popular girl, and it feels like she's mocking him when you're like, in his mind, like if only she had been nice to me, she would have gotten to know like the real me,
Yeah, there's a lot of Jeffrey Dahmer vibes. I mean, Junior was one of the scariest depictions of a serial killer in a novel that I'd ever read, because as someone who used to be very into true crime, a lot of serial killers have brain damage. Like, I bet if we got to see Richard Ramirez's brain, it would be Swiss cheese. Like, that kid had no fucking chance to be functioning in society. But with like from the murder and the necrophilia and keeping the bodies of his girlfriends and spending so much time with the smelly, rotting bodies as they melted away in the pantry, like it was absolutely terrifying. And then, even though he was absolutely vile, it was also so hard to read what was happening to him as well. Like, especially when the tumor was basically like bulging out of his head through his eye. It was horrific and gross. And like, part of you is like, this guy deserves this horrific thing that's happening to him. And then part of you is like, he didn't stand a chance. Like, some people just don't stand a chance.
It renders him so pathetic. I love the way that we're eased into it with the language, like where he's mixing up words. Yeah. And King doesn't really point to the, like, he kind of inserts those moments before he tells us explicitly what's going on.
Yeah. And the headaches, that to me, got headaches. Yeah.
Like, I remember the headaches. I was like, oh, I just thought it was, because I feel like I've seen that in a lot of movies where it's like, oh, the killers have headaches. And yeah, exactly. And then I was like, oh, it's kind of that thing. But so I remember the first time I read it, I didn't think that he had brain problems at all. So I remember when I hit the speech, I thought it was like typos at first, like in the actual text. And I find that really effective now, and reading it and realizing like, oh, we're watching this degradation of this person sort of happen. And I do think that there's also something really unnerving about Barbie and Rusty being witness to that, like, and not understanding the state of him. Like, he is literally a creature by the end. And that scene, I think, resonated with me a lot stronger on the reread, because I remember being disappointed that he goes out in such pathetic fashion on the first read, and similar to Jim Rennie. But I do think that, again, like King says, and and he's also reckoning with, in this book, and we talked about this yesterday, the idea of we don't know why, like, horrible things happen and we don't know why. It's that big question of, why do bad things happen to good people? Or like, why did the dome fall on this town? Or why did the hurricane hit this city? Why did this happen here? Why did the best person I know die in a car accident? All these sorts of things, like the cruel randomness of the universe. And that's the thing about a glioblastoma is, any kind of tumor, obviously, but, that was something that, I dealt with in my family, which was, it's a really horrible, horrible way to die. And for it to happen to somebody who you love is extremely painful. And it's like, and you do wonder, like, how could what kind of God would let this happen?
Yeah.
And I do think those are the questions that I think inserting that into this story was very intentional on King's part, which is that, it's not like there's a reason. It's not like Big Jim Rennie put radiation in Junior's room and that's why he has it. It happened because it happens randomly and it's cruel,
I'm just imagining him like, putting a like a warhead just like sitting there or something.
Can I keep this here, son?
Well, I also wonder because, Big Jim has had this heart problem, and he's had professional doctors look at him and say, like, you need a stent put in, you need, to get this taken care of, and he's kind of waved it off. And I do wonder if Junior could have gotten, like, if it could have been detected, because he talks about before, like, how he's had headaches coming on for a long time, and, like, Big Jim Rennie seems like a guy that would be like, you're fine.
Yeah. Well, along those lines, I'm glad you brought that up, Ashley. Do you remember because they kept saying he needed a pacemaker?
Yeah.
But then Perkins, the sheriff, has a pacemaker and it kills him. Anybody with a pacemaker who gets near the dome dies.
Yeah.
And Jim uses that later as a message from God that he was never meant to get a pacemaker, which to me was one of the most revealing aspects of his character, because in that instance, he is literally endangering himself.
Yeah.
Like he has made this decision to not do the thing that would keep him alive because he doesn't want to change his lifestyle in any way. And then he finds a reason that God meant for it to be that way. And I think that we often, I think a lot of people who use God as justification, they often back into it. You know what I mean? You find yourself at a place where there's nowhere else to turn. And then that's when sort of this, I don't know, in your mind, miracle arises because a string has been drawn between two unconnected things. And I want to use that as a way to say, that's what I sort of think binds, in the end, Junior, Chef, and Big Jim. I'm going to read this little section. It's from near the end of Junior's arc. This is when he basically has made his decision that he wants to go kill Dale. And not only does he want to kill Dale, he wants to kill his dad. And he's also dreamt up this whole conspiracy. That's what has made him sick is this chemical that Dale put on
his dog tags.
Yeah, and on the dog tags. And then that's how he got sick. And then they also find ways to sort of back into, not only did Dale do that, but he's also responsible for the dome. We see, and that is, so let me read this and then I'll elaborate. So, okay. He made a sudden decision. He would kill Dale Barbara. If anyone got in his way, he would kill them too. Then he would find his father and kill him, a thing he had dreamed of doing for years, although he had never admitted it to himself fully until now. Once that was done, he'd seek out Aiden and Alice. If someone tried to stop him, he'd kill them too. He would take the kids back out to Chester Pond, and he would take care of them. He would keep the promise he had made to Alice. If he did, he wouldn't die. God would not let him die of thallium poisoning while he was taking care of those kids. And the idea that he brings God into it is what I think is King very deliberately showing. We all, these three characters in very different ways, have all, what binds them all is their willingness and almost their talent for using God as a thread to connect to unconnected things. You know what I mean? To give more weight to a certain thing or to give their life more purpose. And I think that, for all three of those characters, King is essentially saying, the thought process that goes on with Chef, with Junior is the same one that Rennie does, but Rennie does it through this sort of clear-eyed way that we view as leadership. But he comes up with conspiracies. He comes up with godly spiritual justifications for violence and for fascism in the same way that one person with horrible brain damage does and one person who is a horrible drug addict who has completely lost his mind does. In the end, what the three of them are doing is not that different. And I think that is,
that's true.
A really interesting thing, because when you do have a president who is using spiritual justification for war and things of that nature, you do have to really consider, are we being led by a madman?
Yeah.
And, and I think that this is King saying we are.
We are, yeah. That's something that we touched on yesterday, faith informing political policies. And the biggest issue about it, aside from it being a complete violation of everyone else's religious freedoms, is that the faith that they believe in is one that does not include Earth and mankind continuing on. When I was in Lutheran school, I knew the rapture was going to happen in my lifetime because it's kind of how it's taught. You will experience this one day. all the Christians are going to go to heaven and everyone else is going to have to stay here. And then eventually, you know, some people be saved, some people go to hell, and then this is all over. And, you know, with all the signs of end times happening with like wars, famine, sickness, plague. So like they're always expecting this like end game. So if you're fully convinced that you're going to be spared and you don't have to worry about the longevity of the planet or of the people that exist on it, like it's not meant to last. Jesus is going to take us to heaven.
Yeah.
And so like when Big Jim makes all of these connections and like gives himself this inflated sense of like, I don't know. Do you think he buys it, all of it? Do you think he buys all the God stuff, Big Jim Rennie?
Oh man. I mean, I think.
Or do you think
go
it's
ahead, Caffrey.
just manipulation?
I don't know. I think and I say this from personal experience with people like this, I think if you're, I mean, Jim Rennie is probably a sociopath, but if we're being generous, let's just even call him a narcissist, right? I feel like just the way their brains work is that they'll do anything to convince themselves that they're justified. And it's weird because I don't think it's, I mean, on one hand, it has to be self-conscious, but I feel like on the definition of a narcissist almost makes it subconscious, right? Like I don't think they're thinking to themselves, haha, well, I'll do this and fuck them and then I'll get all the power. I think it's almost like they can't help themselves. It's just this causal wheel that keeps going and going and going. And I don't think they're even capable of that kind of self-reflection. So it's weird because I feel like he convinces himself he believes it, but I don't know. Am I making any sense?
No, you are.
Do you guys know what I mean?
I think like that quote, when fascism comes to America, it'll be wrapped in a flag and carrying a cross, right? These are the kind of people that my God could beat up your God. So whether they believe in it or not, it's a powerful thing and it helps them get their way. And also it's kind of a stop to the argument, right? Well, how come you think this? Because my God said so. And then you can't, it's like, okay, I don't know how to respond to that properly. Yeah. So I think just the fact that it was kind of based on like the Bush Cheney White House, King had to be leaning into that. Whereas both Cheney and Bush professed to being Christians, but I think Bush might have actually believed it, whereas I don't think Cheney did. And I think Big Jim leans a lot more toward that Cheney side, obviously.
Well,
yeah, I think for me, go ahead, Kev.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say it's weird too because I think it's kind of the inverse of the really positive aspects about religion. Because I'm not someone who's religious, but I've softened on it a lot as I've gotten older because I know good people who, you know, whether or not they actually believe in the literalism of the Bible, they use religion as a tool for understanding the world and understanding their life and making sense of it in a way that I find very moving. And I think that's one side of it. I think a certain type of person will use not just religion, but stories and anything that they find belief in to help them understand their life and explain it a little bit, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's a quite majestic sort of thing. But then you take someone who's an awful person like Jim Rennie, and they're also kind of doing the same thing, but they're doing it as a way to justify horrible behavior. And I think and I think they're kind of like evil twin mirror versions of themselves. Anyway,
I think the thing about faith is that it's usually starts from an earnest place. Like yes, it is a very real sort of thing for you. But if you live with it for a really long time, it is very hard for it to maintain a sense of magic. And what it really becomes about is a series of tools for her, and you can say they're tools for how to live a more purposeful life. Or if you are, leaning into the more cynical side of it, what something like Christianity offers is basically a toolkit for you to, flex whenever you need a good, quote unquote, good reason for doing something that is in your own self-interest, because the Bible is, like I said earlier, you can use the Bible to justify anything. You can take a verse and you can lop off what's on either end of it and let it exist in a vacuum, and it will serve a purpose for you. That is basically how Christianity has been weaponized, throughout the world.
They really should have been less vague when they were writing it.
Yeah. Also, in the video game Castlevania Symphony of the Night, there's a quote, and perhaps the same could be said of all religions. And I feel like anyone from any religion throughout history is going to be able to, at least if they do some self-reflection, find the good, the bad, what needs to be fixed, etc. But yeah, I just think this is one of King, other than like The Stand, which really kind of gets into the concepts of good and evil. It's really interesting here to have, Big Jim as the kind of, I don't want to say, would you say he's the most religious in the town? I mean, he certainly discusses religion the most.
He declares himself to be in many ways. I do think that, you're right, though. This is kind of what I was getting at yesterday with the idea that we don't have a Mother Abigail in this story. Like, in many ways, Big Jim is both Mother Abigail and Randall Flagg in this, and like we don't have that beautiful portrait of God, right? Because even Piper Libby, or at least the benevolent portrait of God, like Piper Libby, who is, out of the two preachers in the town, is the more respectable one. She's lost faith, whereas Lester Coggins, who is, the one who's whipping himself at home, he's the one who is very much embedded in all the things that are tearing the town down and defranchising all the people in town. So there is no portrait of like that positive figure who is unselfishly pursuing God, which I think is a really bold and interesting and intentional choice on King's part. And one of the things that made me, I think, really appreciate the book a lot more on this read. Any other thoughts on Jim or Junior? And then we can talk about Julia, I think, briefly. I can't imagine we have a ton to say about her.
Which is a bummer.
Yeah.
I know, right?
I just want to say the Rennies, they're cool guys.
Yeah, real cool guys.
Just want to hang out.
Oh, Dan.
Dan.
Well, I've got a quote about Julia. Basically, in an interview with NPR, King was describing her. He's like, she's a centrist Republican, a dying breed. He goes, I thought to myself, the only antidote to a power grab in a closed environment is the newspaper. And then he said, what a chance to radicalize a nice Republican lady by putting her in a situation by an increasingly fascistic political machine. So I thought that was kind of a funny little quote where he's like, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and she was a Republican because he told us that many times.
I know. It was kind of silly, but I think, and I think we see this a lot on his Twitter nowadays, which,
sure.
I'm not going to talk too much about it, but essentially I think he longs for the days where centrism was at least more of, like, politics have become so polarized. I mean, they've always been. I don't want to act like this is all new.
No, but like
it's
you can watch West Wing and be like, oh, that's right. We used to have conversations about real things sometimes.
Yeah, and I think he longs for those days when you could sort of be a centrist and not be made fun of on the internet.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, and that. So I think he does long for that, which is why I think he sees something very quaint and sweet about this small town woman who identifies as a Republican, but in the old fashioned way, and because, King grew up around Republicans. He himself was a Republican when he went to college, and then he left, kind of as a anti-war hippie, as he'll describe himself. So, I think he thinks back probably a little bit fondly on that young little Republican boy who he was. But I do think that she is an interesting character in, I don't know, the idea of being like, because she does say that she liked Jim Rennie for a long time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
She helped get him his job.
Yeah. She helped get him his job. She was the one who really rooted for him. And then now that he's in power, she's like, oh, fuck, what did I do? And isn't that sort of the dream of every left-wing person, that somebody on the right who elected, somebody like Trump would go to regret it, which usually doesn't happen, especially in this culture. Everybody kind of digs their heels in. And that's why I think there's so much grace given to, and don't worry, I'm not gonna go too much into this, but a lot of the never Trumpers and the Lincoln Project fellas, guys like that who, were Trump guys and then were suddenly like, oh no, we don't like Trump anymore. We want to get a reasonable Republican back in office. And King loves those guys because I think he sees them as this sort of, this, I don't know, resurrection of the old guard. But the problem is those guys were all warmongers, pieces of shit in the Bush era. So I don't buy that
shit real soon. Don't worry.
Exactly. And it's all a fucking grift. But it's like, I do find that character interesting through that lens, where she is the sort of liberal dream of someone who pretty relatively young woman in a town who is regretting what she has wrought as a Republican, and is falling for this young liberal hunk who came strolling into town. Caffrey, what do you think about Julia?
Yeah, I mean, I guess she's a little bit more interesting than Barbie is, right?
She is.
Like, she has a little bit more of a backstory going on. I think it's because she has more history with the town. I wouldn't say I'm riveted by the sections with her, but I feel like her and Dale, once again, it's kind of like in like Bride of Chucky, right? Like the least interesting part are the teen leads, and they're not bad necessarily, but I think there's so much other cooler chaos going on around them. I mean, I'm almost more interested in her political kind of arc than I am her emotional kind of arc, if that
same.
makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, nothing crazy to say about her though.
Yeah.
I do have some. I was gonna say King's Dominion, but more like Room 227 that I'll save when we get to that involving Julia Shumway. So
next episode,
stay
baby.
tuned, get ready for it. Yeah.
Flieger, what do you think about this character?
I agree with a lot of what's been said. I think for me, the most emotional part though is when she was describing the childhood and being, bullied for being the smart kid. It's, the tallest blade of grass is the first cut by the reaper's mow. It's really sad to think of people that maybe pretend to be stupider than they are, or, dumb themselves down just so that they won't stick out. And it's just sad to see like how that stuck with her whole life, as everyone does when they got bullied when they were younger, or it stays with you. But it's kind of interesting how that in a way helped her to manipulate the Leatherhead. Right. She can identify the female Leatherhead, and how that was communicated. You wonder if but for that happening, first of all, if it never happened, she probably would have went to Princeton, right? It happened. She stayed in the town, but then she would have had nothing to communicate with the aliens with. So if she was not there, you could argue that the aliens would have kept the dome on forever. So in a way, she kind of is the big hero.
She is.
If you're going to talk about, she's the one who helps get the dome removed more than anyone else did the entire book.
Yeah, and I don't think I clocked that the first read. I remembered Barbie very well. Maybe it's just because it's a fun name and it's said quite a bit in the book. But, I don't know. I remembered him being the hero, and I remembered sort of there being this reporter. And now that I read it, she is absolutely the hero of the story. She, like we said before, there's a fourth of the book. Barbie's locked up. So Julia is the one who connects Barbie with Colonel Cox. Julia is the one that gets Barbie to Brenda and talks her into hearing him out. Julia was the one who wrote about what Big Jim was doing and made sure the people of Chester's Mill had access to it, even when she was threatened. She was the one who brought in Joe Scarecrow into the mix and vouched for him being a smart kid, and he's the one that found the thing. She
and basically helped organize
brought the dome down. She literally did everything. She's amazing. And I don't know why she doesn't pop more. I don't know why she doesn't stand out more.
Yeah. I mean, I think it might be, it's in the similar vein to Barbie, where King isn't interested in her inner life until the end, right? Because then we get that great story that Flieger mentioned, the bullying story, which I think is incredibly moving. Essentially, she was the smart kid in class and all the kids resented her for it. And then they followed her home one day and kind of knocked her around and ripped her pants off. And she was there in her underwear in the rain. And the only way that she was able to really get home was because one of the bullies kind of took mercy on her and gave her a sweater to wear. And the line that really hit me was because they threw her pants up on top of the bandstand or whatever. And she says she remembers for days afterwards seeing them up on the bandstand. And then even after they disappeared one day, the rain washed them away or whatever, that image lingered with her. And I think that's such a really simple and effective portrait of how one incident of bullying, you see the remnants of it very clearly for a while, and then just sort of the residue of it sticks to you. You don't see it anymore, but it's still there. And that to me was a really effective story and really made me care about her more. But again, it doesn't come until the last 100 pages, which is interesting. And I think that it's because she is, you mentioned all the things she does in the book, but we don't learn that much about her in the process of that happening, which I think is true of Barbie as well. And so, I mean, it doesn't mean that it's a bad character. It's just not the most interesting character.
Yeah, I liked her. But that's about all I can say.
She works. Speaking of characters that we liked, it's time for us to talk about the three characters that we chose to discuss as our favorites, or at least ones, maybe not favorites, but the ones that really made an impact on us. Kath, I'm going to kick it to you. Why don't you start us off? Who is the character that you want to talk about?
All right, I cheated a little bit, include two characters, but they're kind of inseparable. It's it's Andy and the chef.
Nice.
And I think too, because I'm more interested in him once he joins up with the chef. And honestly, it's almost like because they just go to them right to them smoking meth, which I think it's such a funny jump cut.
Instant, yeah.
Like it's great because it makes total sense. I think the over the topness of the book totally earns it. And I talked about this a little bit on the last episode. I just love how it devolves into chaos because they're not really good guys necessarily. I mean, they're a large part of both of them are a large part of the town's problems. But I think because things have just gotten so bad, it's so fun to watch the chaos unfold, and they're just really funny together too. I mean, some of their dialogue is just, it's like a comedy routine almost, like a vaudeville act or something. And it's some of it's a little weird because Chef does a large part of it is because he misses Sammy, and it's weird because he has a lot of funny one-liners about her, which is weird because she has such a horrible tragic arc, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I also just love how just batshit it gets. I mean, like the book just kicks into such high gear, and it involves mysticism and Christianity and drugs and a huge firefight at the end. I was just so entertained every time they were together, and I think when the jump to them doing meth together happened, it was earned, but I also totally didn't see it coming. I'd forgotten about it, even rereading it this time around. And as soon as it happened, I'm like, oh yeah, this is like the catalyst for just everything, turning up to 11, and I love it. So, yeah, both of them together, like once that shift happens, once he goes to like quote unquote negotiate and just totally gives in, because of his grief. So that's
I have the
pick, yeah.
I have the Chef as well. I knew somebody else would choose him, but I couldn't not choose him because
it's great. Like
I agree. That was the part I think I remembered most vividly from my first read was what happens with Andy and Chef, because that you're right. It's funny, and it is like a comedy routine after a while, but it's also, and I've talked about this, it is for me at least like weirdly moving because it's these two people who have essentially been driven in very different ways into becoming very isolated and very lonely, and then they find each other, and and like you said, Ashley, it's kind of funny because it's a great commercial for meth, right?
Totally.
But I think that one of the things that King does that I love is, even though he is sober himself, he doesn't judge anyone in this book who basically turn to drugs and alcohol to cope with what's going on. Like, I want to talk a little bit later about like Alden Dinsmore, sort of, him drinking and driving with Sammy and them popping Percocets as they're driving around. It's like there's such this lovely, beautiful, like non-judgmental way that he writes about those things, where it's like, yeah, in a time like this, like you're just trying to take any little ounce of happiness you can get. And like for Andy and Chef, it's like smoking meth and fist bumping and like, learning how to shoot assault rifles. Like it's very, and then I also love the mysticism aspect because there's a lot of, I think this is where King finds the humor in the kind of lunatic fringe of the religious right. Because when a passenger jet crashes into the dome late in the book, which is a really horrific scene, it's meant very obviously to evoke 9/11, but like Chef doesn't see it as a tragic accident. He sees it as a sign from God. And so I want to read this little section because it's tragic, but also really funny. So,
it's so fun. Like, I mean, like I said, I think this is one of King's funniest books, and a large part is because of these two jokers.
So yeah, now Chef took one of the AKs and laid it across his knees. That was not an airplane, he amplified. No? Then what was it? A sign from God. Chef looked at what he had painted on the side of the storage barn. 2 quotes, liberally interpreted, from the book of Revelation, with the number 31 featured prominently. Then he looked back at Andy. To the north, the plume of smoke in the sky was dissipating. Below it, fresh smoke was rising from where the plane had impacted in the woods. I got the date wrong, he said in a brooding voice. Halloween really is coming early this year. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after tomorrow. Or the day after that, Andy added helpfully. Maybe, Chef allowed, but I think it'll be sooner. Sanders, what, Chef? Take you a gun. You're in the Lord's army now. You're a Christian soldier. Your days of licking that apostate son of a bitch's ass are over. So I think what's so funny about this to me is it reminds me of like a lot of doomsday preachers who always say the world is going to end on this day.
Yeah. And
then they're like, oh, no, it'll actually happen on this day. Like the day comes and goes. And then they're like, oh, it'll happen on this day, or it'll happen on this day. Like, and that's like the Chef for me. He's like, oh, it'll happen on Halloween. Oh, wait. No,
we can make our own earlier. Halloween.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's just like meaningless, and that's why I think like Chef is sort of the comic version. Because earlier I was talking about what I saw as the connection between Chef and Junior and and Big Jim. And I think Junior is like the tragic version of it. Big Jim's sort of the cautionary version of it, and then Chef is sort of the comic version of it, you know. And he reminds me a lot of just these people who use like a horrible tragedy like 9/11 as a justification for a million things, like, you know, obviously war and racism, but then you had interpretations from people like Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson that 9/11 was God punishing the world for homosexuality.
Yeah.
And I think one of you guys mentioned, or no, King mentioned that with, you know, Big Jim basically saying, oh, it was because we don't pray enough or whatever. But, you know, but there was a lot more vicious interpretations of it as well. So, yeah, Chef is a good one. Good pick. I just had to throw in my 2 cents on that. Flieger, who is somebody you really loved in this book?
So I tried to narrow it down to 3, and I'm not going to do these, but I think they're worth mentioning. Anderson Cooper, Wolf Blitzer, Jake Tapper,
Wolfie,
who all play major parts in this. Jake only gets in at the end, I believe, but no, I would actually pick Horace the Corgi.
I had Horace
Love
the
it.
Corgi too.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Some of you know I did have a Corgi, so
Aw.
I love the breed. And there's parts in it where you have his mind process when he's like, a job is a job. And because they are farm hands, they need assignments and they want assignments. Like, they're happy when you give them jobs and missions to do. I just think it's interesting. I've never seen so many animal point of views that I can recall in a King novel. I mean, there's Boy, but that's about.
There's one with Cujo, or not Cujo.
Oh, right.
With Kojak in The Stand, and then there is one with Cujo.
And Cujo
well,
at the beginning,
Cujo.
when he's chasing the bat, you definitely.
But there's more. There's more in this book. Yes.
Yeah. So I think he's great. He's 15 years old. He's overweight, and that's a problem with long dogs. I've also had dachshunds, and because of the length of their spine, you can't get them too fat or it can sag. But I like his little comments about how the food tastes bad, but he knows where someone's there, drop some food, and they're always scrounging around. He's named Horace after Horace Greeley, the famous 19th century newspaper man. So that's appropriate. And I suspect that he may have the shine.
He does. Well.
And because when he walks, he talks about, he can smell people. He can tell when their diets change or they smoke or they haven't. But then he starts to see dead owners. And you wouldn't see that. You wouldn't, you might be able to smell it on the dog a few days later. But he talks about walking and taking in the dead owners. And I'm like, is this a dog that has the shine?
Mm-hmm.
He also hears the dead voice.
He mentions Horace, the corgi, mentions that that's just something that dogs can do. Like he even says, he's trying to get, he was trying to get the popcorn under the table when he first hears the dead voice. He hears a woman say, "Take that" to her, referring to the file, which, by the way, was that Brenda? The dead voice?
Oh, that's what I was thinking. That's what I thought it was.
Brenda was the woman who was saying, "Take the file" to Julia. But anyways, he says, Horace, like all dogs, heard dead voices quite often and sometimes saw their owners. The dead were all around, but living people saw them no more than they could smell most of the then 1,000 aromas that surrounded them every minute of every day. And I love that idea. Well, especially like having pets, but cats as well, where like you'll just see them sort of look at something and you're like, "Stop it. It's midnight. Don't look at the corner."
Looking at that ghost.
Yeah. And he's also one of the only recognizable characters on the book cover. On the dust jacket, there's a little corgi at the bottom left. If you look at the first edition, he's actually on there. Yeah, mine's, otherwise I would have grabbed it as well. But yeah, he's one of the only that you can look at. You're like, there he is. Like, he's about this big.
I love him.
So yeah, I'm dog lover, animal lover, Horace lover.
Well, I'm glad he lives because every other dog in this book dies horrifically.
Bad ones.
One gets shot, one suffocates, right?
Yeah, but then there's all the ones when the fire comes.
All the ones that die
they
in
all
the fire.
run. Yeah.
But Horace runs into the soldier's arms and so happy.
I love that. Okay, Ashley, you had Horace. Who else did you have?
Ernie Calvert.
Oh, that's a good left field one. Tell us about Ernie.
This sweet old man. I forgot. I learned today when I was sort of like looking him up. I forgot he was the first one on the scene with Barbie at the beginning of the novel. He's the one that sort of calls the Air Force for him when Barbie's like, "Call the Air Force." Yeah. That was Ernie.
Okay.
But I love that he was immediately on their side when Jackie told him about Big Jim. His quote was, "Thank God someone sees that what that windbag's up to." And at some point he mumbles about how he's an incompetent son of a bitch. He just reminded me a lot of my grandpa. And then especially when you got to see his relationship with his granddaughter, Nori. And
I love that.
It was his idea to steal one of Jim Rennie's cars from his lot, and I just think it's so sweet that he doesn't want Nori to know that he knows how to break in and hotwire a car. Like, he makes sure his granddaughter stays. Yeah, he makes sure his granddaughter isn't there to see him break into and hotwire this car. And I just thought that was sweet in this moment. Even though, like, Nori knows what's going on. She even, like, makes a point to be like, I know what's going on. But it's sweet that my grandpa wants to hide this from me. And I was just really devastated when he died. He was one of the first ones that was up against the dome at the end when the military was blasting the air in. And he had some sort of like seizure or heart attack. It was rough.
Yeah, that one was rough. Okay, I'm going to say, I mentioned him earlier. I'm going to say Alden Dinsmore.
Yeah. Oh, Alden, not...
I was going to say, I figured one of you would choose Ollie. And because I think that section is gorgeous, incredibly powerful. But... I think my favorite scene of the book is and I think it's just because it's so simple and it's the kind of scene that any editor who is trying to cut down a book that is 1,100 pages would make you get rid of it. And I love that King has the power to not have to get rid of scenes like this. And also that he is willing to write scenes like this that don't really move the plot forward, that don't really, that do nothing except for illuminate, like basically forge an unlikely friendship in a really small, like, or in a really fraught time. And this is basically a scene where Sammy Bushy, who is, has been sexually assaulted and we don't really know what she's up to, but we know she's up to something. And she wants to get to this house. It turns out she's going to this house to get a gun. And on her way there, she hitchhikes, or she's walking, but she's not feeling well. And then Alden Dinsmore, who has lost his son earlier in the book, is basically driving around with a case of beer at his feet and picks her up, and then they drive. And I just want to read like a little bit of this section because I think it's really lovely. A tear crept down his cheek. "I'll go any way you want, Missy Lou. Gonna keep driving till the beer's gone. You want beer?" "Yes, please." The beer was warm, but she drank greedily. She was very thirsty. She fished one of the perks out of her pocket and swallowed it with another long gulp. She felt the buzz hit her in the head. It was fine. She fished out another perk and offered it to Alden. "Want one of these? They make you feel better." He took it and swallowed it with beer, not bothering to ask what it was.
Been there.
Here was the Motton Road. He saw the intersection late and swung wide, knocking the Crumley's mailbox flat. Sammy didn't mind. "Grab another, Missy Lou." "Thank you, sir." She took another beer and popped the top. "Want to see my boy?" In the glow of the dashboard lights, Alden's eyes looked yellow and wet. They were the eyes of a dog who'd stepped in a hole and went leg broke. "Want to see my boy Rory?" "Yes, sir," Sammy said. "I sure do. I was there, And then he says, "Everybody was. I rented my field. Probably helped to kill him. Didn't know. We never do. We never know, do we?" And that line killed me because I think it relates to, I know, just the idea of the random cruelty of the universe, like we never know. Like, and I think that's something we do is we blame ourselves for something that it's the same way that I think people tie a thread between one thing and the other using God to sort of connect to unconnected things. And in our own grief, I feel like we do that.
Oh,
we connect,
absolutely.
something that we've done to some kind of tragedy because we feel some kind of guilt, or whether it's survivor's guilt or anything else. And I just love that little moment where he goes, "I probably helped to kill him." He's like, "I don't know. We never know."
I like where I like that as the line. "You want beer?" Because that reminds me of Eastbound Down with Roy pouring the beer on the head.
You like beer?
What's the matter? What's the matter with you?
Hey, shut the fuck up. Okay, I'm going to go back to reading this beautiful scene now.
Sorry, that was all I could think of.
No, I love that. Alden dug in the big pocket of his overalls and pulled out a battered wallet. He took both hands off the wheel to pull it open, squinting and flipping through the little celluloid pockets. "My boys gave me this wallet," he said. "Rory and Ori. Or he's still alive. That's a nice wallet, Sammy said, leaning across to take hold of the steering wheel. She had done the same for Phil when they were living together many times. Mr. Dinsmore's truck went from side to side in slow and somehow solemn arcs, barely missing another mailbox. But that was all right. The poor old guy was only doing 20, and Moughton Road was deserted. On the road, WCIK was playing low, Sweet Hope of Heaven by the Blind Boys of Alabama. Aiden thrust the wallet at her. There he is. There's my boy with his grandpa. Will you drive while I look? Sammy asked. Sure. Alden took the wheel back. The truck began to move a little faster and a little straighter, although it was more or less straddling the white line. And, it's not an overly sentimental scene. Like these are people who have both lost something very valuable to them, and they're both in a lot of pain. And I like that they're not like pouring their guts out necessarily. They're just having this very simple kind of grief choke conversation. And then the little acts of kindness and familiarity, like when he takes his hands off the wheel to get his wallet out and she just starts steering the car for him. And she's not like yelling and being like, watch the road or anything like that. It's just this like simple, sweet, solemn little scene. And it's probably my favorite of the whole book.
It's in my top.
It's the closest I probably came to getting a little misty eyed. Yeah. And especially with what happens to both those characters, because we find out later that Alden kills himself and, leaves a note for his son that's basically like, I'm sorry, maybe they'll take you in town. Like he just can't deal with his grief anymore after his wife shoots her head off. And then Sammy obviously gets revenge on the Yeah, she kills herself after she kills two of the people who had assaulted her. So, it's so tragic, and it just breaks my heart. So I just wanted to read that.
Well, she hadn't lost her son at the time, but she knew what she was going to do. So she knew that she had, kind of spent all the time she was going to spend with her son as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kath, who do you got?
I have, it's not a joke pick, but yeah, I picked Thurston Marshall just because he's the source of some of my favorite pound cake, which I'm not going to spoil. And I guess you could say he's kind of creepy, like sleeping with a grad student and everything, but
yeah, they all do that.
Yeah, that is true to life, right? But there's something, like I said before, I like that he's this side character that actually goes on this pretty big evolutionary journey. I love when he is, going back to his medic days essentially and becoming this like source of help around the hospital rather than just this sort of intellectual sits around, drinks wine and fucks his grad student. Like I just like seeing that arc for someone. And then also a pretty shocking death. I didn't think he was going to bite it at the end like he did, and kind of a cruel death also.
Yeah, because it's it's just like a shrug when it happens.
And he's got a big dorkola. That's all I'll say about that.
Yeah,
what do you guys think about him?
I think Thurston's a funny character because he's such a doofus when he's in professor mode. Like he's bragging about the literary magazine that he edits, and he's like,
and he feels accurate too. Like I've known professors like that, yeah.
But then he becomes like so competent when he becomes a medic, and it's the change is swift. And this is where I feel a little bit of King's resentment towards, I think, the academia class. And they say like, oh, he should be doing this instead of being a professor. And there's very much King being like, why don't you actually do something instead of just teaching like bullshit literary theory? You know what I mean? Like it seems like almost like him just lashing out a little bit at the academic community, because he's like, hey, look at what a better guy this is once he actually helps another person. But anyways, what do you guys think about first?
I also like to see him grow with the kids too. Because at first he was like, I don't know why she's trying to be a mom right now. Like, she never wanted to be a mom. Now all of a sudden we have to take care of these two kids. And then once, what was her name? Carly? Carolyn. Once she bites it, and they are now kind of his response. He just immediately is like, well, they're my kids now.
Yeah.
Yeah. All I had in my notes was he rose to the occasion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did.
In several ways.
I think he'll also rise to the occasion in pound cake in the next episode. We'll get there later. Mr. Flieger, who else do you have?
I picked Mr. Joseph Scarecrow Joe.
Scarecrow Joe.
One of the kiddos.
Yeah, and so I did a combination of the book and the audiobook, as I usually do. So a lot of the scenes with the kids just fell during the audiobook. So it was great to hear the reader kind of go into teen voice mode, but it would be like, yeah, cinnamon straws are awesome. Like, yeah, get the boards, bros. And also just King using teenage slang is just so funny how kind of clumsy it can be.
Oh yeah.
but he's very ahead of his time, and it's Julia, right? She recognizes that he's a smart boy. He is the first to even make an observation that this device looks almost alien.
Yeah.
Very early in the book, like way before anyone else even has an idea. But yeah, I just found it was fun to see him. I should just say, like, the whole group of kids. It was like Nori and Benny as well. Yeah, they had the better understanding of like internet tech than anyone in the town. You know, they're able to help when needed. They get the live feed. I just think they were kind of unsung heroes in this.
Yeah, I love those archetypes, and I feel like they're really necessary in a big ensemble piece like this, like the super smart. And like I think Joe even name checks near the end of the book, like the Spielberg Amblin sort of archetype,
Totally.
Yeah.
the hyper smart kid who helps, save the day. And he's like, I didn't help save the day, but he did.
Yeah. And one of them mentions, like, he's like, I can't die. I haven't beat Warhammer yet. Like,
can you even beat Warhammer? Isn't that?
I think it's ongoing, but I know that's a show that's coming out soon. So in your honor, Joe, I will watch it.
No, I love those. I love that archetype of kind of the kids who stumble upon the big secret, Ashley, who do you got?
Sloppy Sam Verdreau.
Yeah.
Sloppy Sam.
I also had him.
Sloppy Sam.
Such a great late period hero turn.
He started out as a real piece of shit. But he ended up literally saving the day. He started the riot at the grocery store by hitting Georgia in the face with the rock. Obviously, it was not his plan. Rennie had Junior steal some whiskey and bribe him with it, but he redeems himself by taking Barbie and Julia. I love that he was able to take them to the black box because of how much smoking he had done in his life. So he was able to like temporarily withstand the toxic air. Like they were like, he's doing fine.
That was a bit of humor I really needed at the end of the book. I remember I felt so grateful like when that happened, because it was just like, this person's dead. This person's dead. They're all choking and dying.
Here
and
he
then
comes
he just
with
walks
his red
up like,
wagon,
hey, everyone.
And he's like, I have oxygen.
I love that.
And I do love, I don't love, it was really heartbreaking. He was like trying to confess his sins because they don't know that he started the riot. They don't know that he threw that first rock or brick or whatever he threw at Georgia to make her jaw fall off her face. But we'll
be talking about that next up.
But he tries to confess and he can't quite talk. He's coughing. He can't breathe. And they're telling him, like, don't worry, but whatever you did, you made up for it.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it.
Yeah. And I like that he wants to just get that fresh air at the end. Someone who spent his whole life smoking, and then his final request is clean air.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it.
My third one is Carter. Is it Thibodeau?
I said Thibodeau, but I might be wrong.
No, there's a coach on the Bulls,
Thibodeau.
the former coach, Thibodeau. I think that H is silent.
I like Carter a lot. I want to read this quote, and then I have a little thing. Carter felt pretty satisfied with himself. A week ago, he'd been replacing mufflers, wearing goggles to keep the sifting rust flakes from salt-rotted exhaust systems out of his eyes. Today, he was a man of position and influence. A little smelly air seemed a small price to pay for that. And this was near the end of the book, and he basically has ascended to Big Jim's right hand, and the town is like literally falling apart, but he's in power, and he's like, hey, it's all right to rule over like a disgusting rotted kingdom because I'm in power now. And I think that it's such like a quietly malevolent thing. And I like that character because he's the kind of guy who has a lot of potential. He's he's a quote unquote dumb guy who, based on his upbringing, circumstances, and economics, kind of falls in with a certain bad boy group. But he's not, but he's got this real genuine nasty streak. Jim really awakens something in him. And I guess the reason I responded to it is I think you think about how many inspirational stories we've read or seen about like some kid from a poor neighborhood who's given an opportunity and then they make something like it's in service to something really noble. I don't know, even like Eminem, right? Like you got one shot and he makes it and he becomes a big, powerful, awesome rapper. And it's like,
King loves Eminem too, as we know from the Entertainment Weekly archives. Yeah.
But I love that Carter is like basically given that opportunity and he's good and he runs with it, but it's only in service to
Evil.
Power. You know what I mean? Like it's not a case of being misled like Harold Lauder. That was because I thought about him. He's not a patsy like Harold Lauder is, and his arc is very different, but he is someone who sort of rises through the ranks of an evil organization before crashing very quickly. And there's a tragedy to Harold because he had an opportunity. There was a part of him that did want something better and something noble and something community driven. Whereas Carter is someone who gets the opportunity and he actually succeeds at what he wants to do. Like it's all in service to selfishness and pain. And so he is this like bad kid who done good. But then even then he gets fucked in the end because even he's not as cunning as Big Jim. But I do love that that's sort of his arc is, even though Jim calls him his son basically and is like, and then Carter's moved by that because he had a shitty dad. Even he is like, well, we only have so much air in here and I got to kill my dad now. It's like, I love that ruthlessness because in the end, people who are only operating in self-interest are going to turn on whoever it is, even if it's somebody who called you their son, So anyways, it's a very fitting sort of character. And I guess what I like about it too is, I think you said this in the last episode, Kath, like, I guess we all thought Junior was going to do what Carter ends up doing in this story. And I like that Junior gets this left field chaos agent narrative, whereas Carter sort of, is this minor character early on who ends up becoming a really vicious villainous character who, again, doesn't get undone by the good guys. He just gets undone by his own that was
hubris. One thing that was really good about this novel with 100 characters. Like I said before, like the whole slice of life thing where it's like it starts when the dome comes down, it ends when the dome comes up, and this is just what happened. I'm just telling you what happened because there was no point where I thought Carter was going to take that role, and there was no point where I thought Junior was going to die that early. Like it really was. You did not know who was going to die, how they were going to die, and when they were going to die, even to the very, very end, who was going to survive. It was constantly suspenseful.
Yeah, I agree. Kath, last one.
All right, I picked Georgia Rue actually because we talk a lot about King's bullies, and I do think the brown shirts, the squad of policemen. I mean, there are differentiations, but I think the ones who aren't Carter do get a little muddled. Just because there's kind of a lot of them, and they're maybe not as distinct as like Belle Chuggins and Victor Chris and Henry Bowers. Georgia was very interesting to me because we do see vulnerability from her in, it's weird because her and Carter are engaged, right? I think.
I know they're just boyfriend, girlfriend. I believe Frankie was engaged to Angie.
That's right. And so that's weird because she's like cheering on her, boyfriend as he like rapes this other woman. And that's real. And I'm not just picking that because I'm like, oh, it's like dark or whatever, but it's like, you do see this need of her wanting to be accepted by these horrible, horrible people. And we see that in the hospital too, where she's so sad that none of them have, or only one of them has visited her.
Yeah. And not even her boyfriend.
Not even her. No, exactly. And like, that feels like such a specific choice. And I feel like I've known people like that. I don't know. I feel like I'm constantly drawn in King novels to the group of villains, but like the lowest person on the totem pole who weirdly maybe isn't a sociopath, but wants so badly to be accepted by these other people. I mean, Harold Lauder falls into that a little bit. And so she just really stood out to me and was specific in a way that maybe some of the other ones weren't. Like it feels weird to say I feel kind of bad for her at the end because she commits a horrible act also. But I feel like you at least see her psychology and you see how she got to the place where she's at in those final moments right before Sammy, very deservedly so, officer. But like I do, it just feels like such a pathetic situation on all ends, right? Like, she sort of me, I guess. Yeah, she's
sort of the patsy of this in a lot of ways because she is. She's on Big Jim's police force. She's like one of the new trusted deputies. And then the food riot, which is essentially like a CIA psyop that Big Jim orchestrates, she's the victim of it. You know what I mean? Like he goes against his own people in order to facilitate the riot that will benefit him specifically. And so she becomes the fallen soldier that has to die without knowing, in service to his plan. So
Yeah.
so there is there is something, you know, and then
interesting about her. Yeah.
And you learn that her mom's like an alcoholic and stuff too. So
yeah. And once again, not at all. She's a horrible person, and she, you know, but she deserves.
There's layers
that gets her. But yeah, there's layers to her, and I was very like haunted by that scene with her and Sammy at the end, or not the end, but the end for both of them anyway.
The jaw is so fucked up.
The jaw stuff always just gets to me.
Yeah.
Ugh, nasty.
Especially when there's no one to help you. Like,
yeah,
you just gotta linger like that.
Flieger, who do you got?
I'll do another left field choice because Sam was my go-to. I gotta say the Leatherheads.
Good choice.
And there's a Aqua Teen Hunger Force episode where there's these characters called the Mooninites.
Oh, I love them.
And in my head, that's what I kept picture them looking like. And the Mooninites are these little like pixel aliens, and they're like, "Oh, you're puny planet. We have 5,000 dimensions," and they just keep topping, and they're like, it's almost like Earth is our moon, right? And they're just like kind of these asshole pricks, and they just think they're so advanced. And I just picture the Leatherheads interacting, and you know, you're like, what could they see? Are they just observe? You know, can they read the minds? And it's just like these kids just misbehaving. It just cracks me up. And once you get that image in their head, if you know the Aqua Teen characters, like, it just cracks me up.
Yeah, now I'm not going to forget that.
I kept trying to find like fan fiction drawings because I want to know what these Leatherheads look like. I still can't picture them as anything else. So yeah, I got to say Leatherheads.
Yeah,
it
reminds me of, you know how when people play The Sims and they'll like put their sim in a pool and then they take out the ladder.
Yeah.
And that's
exactly.
like a popular thing to do in The Sims, but like it's not like, you don't consider yourself to being like a shitty person for doing that because it's a fucking sim. Like, who cares? But like at some point, like the sim looks at you and is like, please give me a ladder to get out of this pool. You know what I mean? And then that's when, you know, you maybe feel bad.
The thing I used to do in The Sims was I would build a little concrete shed in my backyard, and then I would I would lock the door, or maybe I would just get rid of the door. I would put somebody in there and I would make them paint, and then I would only put a bar in there. So they were getting drunk and painting, and then I would sell their paintings, but keep them trapped in there, just getting drunk all the time until they like completely lost their mind. That was my little bit of torture.
You're a Leatherhead.
The Van Gogh factory, yes.
But no, I think the Leatherheads is a great choice, and I want to talk more about them in the next episode because I think some of the descriptions are really, I don't know, like eerily enigmatic, and I think I know just enough about them for it to be effective. I think that's something a lot of people criticize is, you know, we get this little glimpse of them and then we don't get I think for a lot of people, they either think we got too much Leatherheads or not enough Leatherheads. And for me, I think it's just right, like the little piggies. And yeah, I want to talk more about them because I think it's neat that they're children too, because then it makes me wonder, well, what do their parents look like? You know,
I keep thinking about Leatherhead from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I was thinking that the alligator, right?
Yeah, he's cool. He's a cool villain.
He has like a vest.
Yeah, he's awesome.
I think like Giancarlo Esposito is voicing him in that new Seth Rogen movie. I know he's in it. Anyways, Ashley, do you have one more?
My last one was the Leatherheads.
Okay.
Hell yeah.
Any shout-outs?
I know, we're on the same page. I'll save everything I have to say about them for the next episode because it's mostly about like how they communicate. I think it's cool.
Do you have anyone else you want to do a quick shout out for?
God,
as we
I
wrap
loved
up?
Ollie. Ollie. I'll just say Ollie. Poor
Yeah.
Ollie.
Oh yeah, we didn't. No one.
But
I
also,
thought
like,
someone was going to.
Ollie was genius, like crawling under the potatoes to protect himself from like the heat of the initial blast, and having the tank of oxygen, and he knew how to use it. Like, he was very capable, and he could have just really given up. I mean, his whole family was dead.
Yeah. I think we'll be discussing Ollie in probably a section in the next episode, so he'll get some love there.
Yeah.
The last character as we wrap up, I just want to give a shout out to the worst name I have ever read in a Stephen King book, Romeo Burpee.
Oh God, yeah.
Or Rami Burpee.
Rami
Just
Burpee.
the worst name.
That's the worst name I ever heard.
It's the
Joey
worst name I ever
Jojo.
heard. But I like the character because he was like the kind of classic small King character where he's like got all these really fun distinguishing characteristics where he's got greasy Elvis hair. He's like French Canadian, and he's, you know, like migrated to Maine or whatever. So he's got this really bizarre accent that King just has a ball with. And then he's a total wife guy as well, which I love. So I don't know. A little shout out to that character because I think that he has a fun little journey, and he's like kind of just a fun side character, like the kind that gives a lot of texture and life to the narrative, I think. So any final shout outs before we wrap up this up? Awesome. So listeners, we will be back next week with basically going through all of our categories: Misery, Cemetery, Pound Cake, King's Dominion, all the fun stuff. We're going to be unpacking all of that for you. So yeah, thanks for listening, and let's sign off. Long days
and
pleasant
nights.
Bye, everyone.
I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. But you know you want somebody to treat you good.
This is the end of our show. For now. Tune in next week. If you like our programming, consider searching for other bloody disgusting podcasts, such as Creepy, Horror Queers, The Boo Crew, SCP Archives, Nightlight, Margaret's Garden, and more.